Grandaddy's Place by Helen V. Griffith. Pictures by James Stevenson. One day, Mama said to Jeanette, "It's time you knew your granddaddy." Mama and Janetta went to the railroad station and got on a train. Janetta had never ridden on a train before. It was a long ride, but she liked it. She liked hearing about Mama's grown-up days as they rode along. She didn't even mind sitting up all night. But when they got to Granddaddy's place, Janetta didn't like it at all. The house was old and small, and the yard was mostly bare red dirt. There were a broken down shed and a broken down fence. "I don't want to stay here," said Janetta. Mama said, "This is where I grew up." An old man came out onto the porch. "Say hello to your granddaddy," Mama said. Janetta was too shy to say hello. "You hear me, Janetta?" Mama asked. "Let it be," said Granddaddy. So Mama just said, "Stay out here and play while I visit with your granddaddy." They left Janetta standing on the porch, and she didn't know what to do. She had never been in the country before. She thought she might sit on the porch, but there was a mean-looking cat on the only chair. She thought that she might sit on the steps, but there was a wasp's nest under the roof. The wasps looked meaner than the cat. Some chickens were taking a dust bath in the yard. When Janetta came near, they made mean sounds at her. Janetta walked away. She watched the ground for bugs and snakes, and all at once a giant animal came out of her broken-down shed, and it came straight towards Janetta. It was moving fast. Janetta turned and ran. She ran past the chickens and the wasp's nest and the mean-looking cat. She ran into the house. "There's a giant animal out there," she said. Granddaddy looked surprised. "First I've heard of it," he said. "It has long legs and long ears and a really long nose," said Janetta. Mama laughed. "Sounds like a mule," she said. "Could be," said Granddaddy. "That mule's a tall mule." "It chased me," said Janetta. "It won't hurt you," Mama said. "Go back outside and make friends." But Janetta wouldn't go back outside. "Nothing out there likes me," she said. After dark, Mama and Granddaddy and Janetta sat out on the steps. The mean-looking cat wasn't anywhere around. Janetta hoped the wasps were asleep. She was beginning to feel sleepy herself. Then a terrible sound from the woods brought her wide awake. Was that the mule?" she asked. "That was just some old hoot owl singing his song," said Granddaddy. "It didn't sound like singing to me," said Janetta. "If you were an owl, you'd be tapping your feet," said Granddaddy. They sat and listened to the owl, and then Granddaddy said, "It was just this kind of night when a star fell into the yard." "What star?" asked Janetta. "Now, Daddy," said Mama. "It's a fact," said Granddaddy. "It landed with a thump, and it looked all around, and it said, 'Where am I?'" "You mean the stars speak English?" asked Janetta. I guess they do," said Granddaddy, "because English is all I know, and I understood the star just fine." "What did the star say?" "What did you say to the star?" asked Janetta. Granddaddy said, "I told the star, 'You're in the United States of America.' And the star said, 'No, I mean, what planet is this?' And I said, 'This is planet Earth.'" "Stop talking foolishness to that child," Mama said. "What did the star say?" asked Janetta. "Well, the star said it didn't want to be on planet Earth," said Granddaddy. It said it wanted to get back up in the sky where it came from. So what did you do, Granddaddy? Janetta asked. Nothing, said Granddaddy, because just then the star saw my old mule. Was the star scared? Janetta asked. Not one bit, said Granddaddy. The star said, can the mule jump? And I said, fair for a mule. And the star said, good enough. Then the star hopped on the mule's back and said, jump. Mama said, now you just stop that talk. Don't stop, Granddaddy, said Janetta. Well, Granddaddy said, the mule jumped, and when they were high enough up, that star hopped off and the mule came back down again. Was the mule all right? Asked Janetta. It was thoughtful for a few days, and that's all, said Granddaddy. Janetta stared up at the sky. Which star was it, Granddaddy? She asked. Now, Janetta, Mama said, you know that's a made-up story. Granddaddy looked up at the stars. I used to know, he said, but I'm not sure anymore. Oh, I bet that mule remembers, Janetta said. Very likely does, said Granddaddy. From somewhere in the bushes, some cats began to yowl. That's just the worst sound I know, Mama said. Janetta, chase those cats. They're just singing their songs, said Granddaddy. That's all right, Mama, said Janetta. If you were a cat, you'd be tapping your feet. Mama laughed and shook her head. One of you is bad as the other, she said. The next day, Granddaddy and Janetta went fishing. Janetta had never been fishing before. She didn't like it when Granddaddy put a worm on the hook. Doesn't that hurt him? She asked. I'll ask him, said Granddaddy. He held the worm up to the front of his face. Worm, how do you feel about this hook? He asked. He held the worm up to his ear and listened, and then he said to Janetta, It's all right. That worm says there's nothing he'd rather do than fish. I want to hear him say that, Janetta said. She took the worm and held it up to her ear. He's not saying anything, she said. That worm is shy, said Granddaddy, but I know he just can't wait to go fishing. Granddaddy threw the line into the water. It wasn't long before he caught a fish. Then he gave Janetta the pole so that she could try. She threw the line in, and before long she had a fish too. It was just a little fish. Janetta looked at it lying on the bank. It wasn't moving its fins. It was moving its fins and opening and closing its mouth. I think it's trying to talk, Janetta said. It may be at that, said Granddaddy. He held the fish up to his ear. It says, cook me with plenty of cornmeal, said Granddaddy. Oh, I want to hear it say that, said Janetta. Can you understand fish talk? Asked Granddaddy. I don't know, said Janetta. Well, all that fish can talk is fish talk, said Granddaddy. Janetta held the fish up to her ear and listened. It says, throw me back, Janetta said. Granddaddy looked surprised. Is that a fact? He asked. Clear as anything, said Janetta. Well, then I guess you better throw it back, said Granddaddy. Janetta dropped the little fish into the water and watched it swim away. Granddaddy threw the line back in and began to fish again. I never saw anybody learn to fish talk so fast, he said. Oh, I'm going to learn to worm talk next, said Janetta. When they had had enough fish for supper, Janetta and Granddaddy walked home. The mean-looking cat came running to meet them. She purred loud purrs and rubbed against their legs. I didn't know that cat was friendly, Janetta said. He's friendly when you've been fishing, said Granddaddy. The mule came out of the shed and walked towards them with its ears straight up. Janetta didn't know whether to run or not, and the mule walked up to her and pushed her with its nose. Janetta was sorry she hadn't run. "What do you know?" Granddaddy said. "That old mule likes you." "How can you tell?" Janetta asked. "It only pushes you that way if it likes you," said Granddaddy. "Really?" asked Janetta. "It's a fact. Up until now, that mule has only pushed me and the cat and one of the chickens." Janetta was glad she hadn't run. She reached out her hand and touched the mule's nose. "Granddaddy," she said, "what's the mule's name?" "Never needed one," said Granddaddy. "It's the only mule around." "Can I name it?" asked Janetta. "You surely can," said Granddaddy. Janetta thought. "I could call it Nosy," she said. "That would suit that mule just fine," said Granddaddy. Janetta thought some more. "Maybe I'll call it Beauty," she said. "That's a name I never would have thought of," said Granddaddy. The mule gave Janetta another push. "This mule really likes me," Janetta said. "It must know I'm going to give it a name." "You don't have to give it anything," said Granddaddy. "That mule just likes you for your own self." After supper, Granddaddy and Mama and Janetta sat out on the steps and watched the night going on. The stars began to show themselves one by one. Now I know what I think I'll name that mule," Janetta said. "I'll call it Star." "Should have thought of that myself," said Granddaddy. "Tomorrow I'll give the cat a name," said Janetta. "Only fair now that the mule has one," said Granddaddy. "After I get to know that chicken, I'll name them too," said Janetta. "Then you'll be able to call them when you want them to come." "Well, that will be handy," said Granddaddy. "You'll be naming that hoot owl next," Mama said. "Oh, I've been thinking about it," said Janetta. Mama laughed, and Granddaddy did too. "Now, how did we get along round here before you came?" he asked. "I've been wondering that too, Granddaddy," said Janetta. Good night. I love you.